The air in the cottage was thick with the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and the faint, almost cloyingly sweet smell of a toddler's spilled apple juice. Melissa Crane sat on the rough-hewn floorboards, her back against a chintz sofa that smelled faintly of mothballs. She was building a lopsided tower of brightly colored wooden blocks. Across from her, 2.5-year-old Haley, her captive, her charge, her promised daughter, clapped her small hands together, a hesitant smile finally gracing her tear-stained face. Next to them, Melissa's own son, 7-year-old Tyler, was meticulously arranging a line of toy cars, creating a silent, orderly traffic jam in the midst of their chaotic new reality. To an outside observer, it might have been a portrait of rustic domesticity. A mother, her adoring son, and his new little sister whiling away a quiet afternoon in a secluded cabin. But the tranquility was a fragile, painstakingly constructed illusion. Every smile Melissa offered was a performance, calibrated for an audience of 2 small children. Every gentle word she spoke was a line from a script she repeated to herself in the dead of night. And the steady, anxious thrumming of her own heart was a constant, terrifying reminder that this perfect family picture was a masterpiece of deception, painted on a canvas of unforgivable lies. Haley, with the charming clumsiness of her age, reached out and pushed a yellow block at the base of the tower. It tumbled with a soft clatter onto the worn rug. For a suspended moment, the child's face clouded over, her lower lip beginning to tremble in that all too familiar prelude to a storm of grief. "Mama!" she whimpered, the single word a small, sharp dart that flew past Melissa's defenses and pierced the most vulnerable part of her heart. "It's okay, sweetie," Melissa cooed, her voice a practiced, soothing melody she'd perfected over years of motherhood. She pulled the little girl into a gentle hug, inhaling the scent of her hair. Different from Tyler's, a unique blend of baby shampoo and something that was just Haley. "We can build another one. A bigger one. See? Tyler will help." Tyler looked up from his cars, his expression one of profound, 7-year-old earnestness. "It's okay, Haley," he said, echoing his mother. "We're a family now. I'm your big brother. I'll protect you." Melissa's heart swelled with a fierce, desperate love for her son, a love so powerful it felt like it could justify anything. This was for him, all of it, the risk, the constant gnawing fear that lived like a parasite in the pit of her stomach. It was all a sacrifice on the altar of his happiness. For 4 years, ever since he was old enough to understand the concept, he had asked for a sibling, a brother or a sister, a dad, a complete family, and she, a single mother, drowning in a sea of credit card debt and soul-crushing loneliness, had been powerless to give him any of it, until David. Her mind, a traitorous vessel, drifted back 6 months to the sterile blue-white glow of her laptop screen, in the suffocating silence of her small apartment. She'd found him on a forum for single parents, a digital oasis where she'd gone to feel less alone. He called himself Daviel, and his posts were a magnetic, intoxicating blend of wounded vulnerability and quiet strength. He wrote with poetic anguish about the pain of his recent divorce, the daily struggle of co-parenting with a toxic and unstable ex-wife, and his profound, all-consuming love for his precious daughter, Haley. Their private messages had started as a trickle, then became a flood. He was everything her life was not: confident, successful, worldly. Yet he claimed to see a strength in her she had long forgotten she possessed. He saw her exhaustion, her financial struggles, her yearning for a partner to share the crushing load of existence. He listened, truly listened, as she poured out her heart about Tyler, about her dream of giving him a stable, 2-parent home with a yard and a sibling to chase. I want that more than anything, Melissa, he'd written to her one night, the words appearing on her screen like a prophecy. For Haley. But her mother, Rachel, she's poisoning her, using Haley's tears to punish me. A child needs consistency, Melissa. She needs a real mother's love, not one that's conditional and manipulative. It's breaking my heart. I feel like I'm losing her to the bitterness. He had painted a vivid, masterful portrait of a noble father fighting for his child's soul against a vindictive, mentally fragile villain. He was the hero of his own story. And Rachel Bennett was the dragon at the gates. And slowly, insidiously, over weeks of late-night chats and whispered phone calls, Melissa had begun to believe him. She believed him because she was primed to. She believed him because the alternative, that she was just another lonely woman being played by a charismatic man, was too painful to contemplate. Believing him meant believing in the possibility of a future. The idea, when he first proposed it, had felt like a lightning strike. He never used the word kidnapping. That was a crude, ugly word for what criminals did. He called it a rescue, a reunification, an act of paternal love. We're not stealing her, Melissa, he'd explained over the phone, his voice a hypnotic, persuasive whisper that seemed to bypass her rational mind and speak directly to her yearning heart. We are saving her. We are taking her from a toxic, damaging environment and giving her the life she was born to have, a complete, loving family, with a mother who will always, always be there for her, and a big brother who will adore her. With you, Melissa. With Tyler. With me. He had an answer for every one of her panicked questions. He would secure new identities, flawless and untraceable. He had already found a remote property for rent in Belize, a place with beaches and sunshine, a world away from their gray, complicated lives. He would provide for them. He would protect them. All she had to do was trust him. All she had to do was help him with the first, most crucial step, the rescue. The day at Everpine Park had been an out-of-body experience, a blur of carefully controlled terror and white-knuckled adrenaline. She had rehearsed her lines in the car, practiced her warm, disarming smile in the rearview mirror. She was Melissa, the friendly kindergarten teacher, a role she had once aspired to before life and finances had gotten in the way. She had watched Rachel Bennett, a woman she'd never met but had been conditioned to see as a callous antagonist, struggle with her fussy, messy toddler. When the moment came, when Rachel hesitated, Melissa had delivered her lines perfectly. Her heart had hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, but David's words had been her mantra. You're the hero here. You are saving a child. Walking away from that playground, Haley's small, trusting hand clutched in hers had felt like stepping off a cliff into a vast, unknown abyss. There was a moment of terrifying freefall, a dizzying sense of having crossed a line from which there was no return. And then, a strange, exhilarating sense of righteous purpose. She had done it. She had secured the most precious piece of their new life. Now, in the waiting game silence of the cottage, 2 days later, the adrenaline had long since faded, leaving behind the low-grade hum of constant anxiety. The cottage was a safe house, a friend's rarely used property David had access to. He had been meticulous in his preparations, stocking it with new toys, colorful bedding, and all of Haley's favorite snacks. Every detail was designed to support the fantasy, to ease the transition. But reality had a way of seeping through the cracks in their carefully constructed fiction. Haley would sometimes stop playing, a shadow passing over her face, and her small voice would ask for her mama. The sound was a physical blow every time. Melissa would have to scoop her up, distract her with a toy or a cookie, and reinforce the lie, telling herself that this was just a temporary phase. Soon, Haley would forget her old, toxic life and embrace this new, better one. She had to. Tyler was her anchor in the storm of her own conscience. He had embraced his role as a big brother with a touching, solemn seriousness. He shared his most prized toy cars, patiently helped Haley with her shoes, and told her elaborate stories about superheroes before her nap. Seeing his unadulterated joy, the pure, uncomplicated happiness shining on his face, was the fuel that kept her from succumbing to the crushing guilt. This was right. It had to be right. This was for him. A shrill ring from the burner phone David had given her shattered the quiet. His voice was tense, stripped of its usual smooth charm. "Things are getting complicated," he said, his words clipped. "The police are more involved than I anticipated. Rachel is, as usual, making things difficult." "What does that mean? What do we do?" Melissa asked, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. "We stick to the plan, but we accelerate. We leave tonight. I need you to go to my house. The car is packed. A new car seat is being delivered this afternoon. Install it. Then bring the car back here. I have to finalize our travel documents. It's the last step. I'll meet you at the cottage." "Your house? David, that's too risky. What if someone sees me?" "I have a plan for that," he said, his voice regaining some of its old confidence. He described the disguise, the leather jacket, the large sunglasses, the hijab. "No one will recognize you. It's just a precaution. Rachel can be unpredictable. We can't risk her showing up and causing a scene." His explanation, like all his explanations, seemed to make a twisted kind of sense. He was the architect of this new reality. She was merely his loyal partner, following the blueprint. The journey to his house felt surreal, like moving through a dream. The taxi ride through unfamiliar suburban streets, the large anonymous brown box delivered to the driveway, letting herself into his front door with the key he had given her weeks before. A small, heavy piece of metal that she had once thought of as the key to her future. His house was pristine, immaculate, and deeply impersonal. It felt less like a home than a showroom, a stage waiting for its actors. She saw the brightly wrapped gift for Tyler on his dresser, a tangible confirmation of his promise to her son. And she saw the tortoise-shell hair clip she had left there a week ago, a small, intimate marker of her presence in his life. It grounded her, solidifying her sense of belonging. This was real. Installing the car seat in the back of his gleaming Audi was a bizarrely domestic act. She struggled with the straps and anchors, the plastic smelling new and clean. For a few minutes, she was just a mother preparing for a family trip. That was the narrative. She clung to it as she drove away from his house and back toward the cottage, the setting sun painting the sky in nervous, bruised shades of orange and purple. David's arrival at the cottage in a taxi an hour later was a wave of pure relief. The plan was back on track. He was here. He was calm. He was in control. He held up a large manila envelope with a triumphant smile. "The last pieces of the puzzle," he'd said, tapping it, "are new lives. Our passports to freedom." They moved with the practiced efficiency of a couple who had rehearsed this moment in their minds 100 times. She gathered the children, dressing Haley in a warm sweater, while he did a final sweep of the cottage, erasing their presence. He seemed unfazed, his demeanor radiating a powerful confidence that soothed her own frayed nerves and silenced the screaming voice of doubt in her head. They were in the car, pulling away from the dark, silent cottage, on the very precipice of their new beginning, when the world shattered into a million pieces. One moment, they were driving down the narrow, tree-lined lane, the darkness a comforting blanket. The next, the world exploded in a silent, strobing nightmare of blue and red. Police cars seemed to materialize out of the blackness of the trees, their flashing lights slicing through the night, forming a silent, menacing barricade. "What's happening? What is this?" she cried, her hands flying to her mouth as she twisted in the passenger seat. David's face, illuminated in the strobing infernal light, was a mask of utter disbelief, which quickly contorted into a snarl of pure, unadulterated rage. "She followed you!" he hissed, slamming his fist hard against the steering wheel. The violence of the act made her flinch. "That bitch! She must have followed you!" The commands came through a bullhorn, amplified and terrifying, seeming to come from all directions at once. "Police! Freeze! Put your hands where I can see them!" The fantasy collapsed. The dream dissolved. The carefully constructed stage was torn down in an instant. This was not a rescue. This was not a reunification. This was a crime scene, a felony. And she was at the dead center of it. She saw the officers, their faces grim and professional, their weapons drawn and steady. She heard Tyler begin to cry in the back seat, a high, terrified wail that cut through the cacophony, and she saw Haley, startled awake, looking around with wide, confused eyes at the chaos that had just engulfed her. Then, through the flashing lights, she saw her, Rachel Bennett, running toward them, her face a mask of primal maternal fury and incandescent love. She wasn't the villain from David's stories. She wasn't a monster. She was a mother. A mother just like her. And in that one shattering moment, seeing the fierce, undeniable power of Rachel's love for her child, Melissa understood the true, monstrous nature of what she had done. The arrest was a dehumanizing blur of cold steel handcuffs biting into her wrists, disorienting commands shouted in her ears, and the heart-wrenching sound of her own son's cries as he was gently but firmly led away by a woman with a kind face and sad eyes. "I want my mom!" he wailed, reaching for her, and the sound broke something deep and essential inside her. In the sterile, suffocating quiet of the police interview room, the full weight of her choices crashed down upon her. The fluorescent lights hummed, indifferent. The gray walls seemed to press in on her. David's charm was a lie. His promises were poison. He had not offered her a family. He had offered her a prison cell, and she had walked into it willingly, dragging her innocent son in with her. She was not a hero. She was a fool. She was a kidnapper. She was a monster. The story she had so carefully told herself to justify her actions crumbled to dust, leaving only the cold, hard, and unforgivable truth. She was consumed by a guilt so profound, so total, it felt like it was dissolving her from the inside out. Guilt for the terror she had inflicted on Haley. Guilt for the pain she had caused Rachel. But most of all, a soul-crushing, world-ending guilt for her son. In her desperate, selfish attempt to give him a perfect family, she had utterly destroyed his world. An hour, or maybe a lifetime later, a female officer opened the door. "You have a visitor." Melissa looked up, her eyes raw and swollen, expecting to see a court-appointed lawyer or a grim-faced social worker. But it was Rachel Bennett who walked in, her face pale and etched with exhaustion, but her expression unreadable. Melissa flinched, physically recoiling, bracing herself for the storm of hatred, the righteous condemnation she so richly deserved. But Rachel's voice, when she spoke, was not filled with rage. It was quiet, steady, and devastating in its unexpectedness. "I wanted to ask you about Tyler." At the mention of her son's name, Melissa's fragile composure shattered completely. "Is he okay?" she sobbed, the words torn from her. "They won't tell me where they've taken him. Is he scared?" "He's scared," Rachel confirmed honestly, her gaze unwavering. "And he misses you." "I've ruined everything," Melissa wept, burying her face in her cuffed hands. "I've ruined his life." Rachel was silent for a long moment, letting the broken words hang in the sterile air. "I came here to ask your permission for something," she said finally. Melissa looked up, her mind struggling to process anything beyond her own despair. "I'd like to take Tyler in," Rachel said, while you deal with this. Not permanently, but as a temporary guardian. So he doesn't have to go to strangers." The words were incomprehensible. They were a language from another universe. Melissa stared at her, her tear-blurred eyes trying to find the trick, the trap. You want to take care of my son?" she whispered. "After what I did? To you? To your daughter?" "Your mistake shouldn't ruin Tyler's life," Rachel said, her voice firm, grounded in a certainty that Melissa found terrifying and beautiful. "He's innocent in all of this. He's already formed a bond with Haley. Tearing them apart now would only cause more trauma for both of them." The statement was so logical, so compassionate, so utterly contrary to the hate-filled narrative David had woven around her heart, that it felt like a physical blow. The woman she had been taught to despise, the woman whose life she had conspired to wreck, was offering her son a kindness, a sanctuary, a grace she could never have imagined. It was an act of mercy so profound it laid bare the true pathetic depth of her own moral failure. Tears flowed freely down Melissa's face now, but they were different tears. They were tears of shame, of regret, of a grief so vast it had no name, but also of a bewildering, undeserved gratitude. She looked at the woman across the table, a mother who had fought a dragon and, instead of slaying it, had chosen to shelter its young. "Yes," Melissa whispered, the single word a surrender, an admission, a confession, and the only prayer she had left. "If they'll allow it, yes, please, please, take care of my boy." She watched Rachel leave the room, taking the last vestiges of her self-deception with her. The door closed, locking her alone in the crushing, humming silence. The dream was over. The lie was dead. All that remained for her was the long, slow, and agonizing road toward consequence. But in the smoldering wreckage of her life, a single, flickering, impossible light remained. Her son would be safe. Her son would be loved. And that love, that impossible grace, would come from the very heart she had tried so desperately to break.